welcome to Velocity Talks. My name is Christopher Durham, and I'm the president of the Velocity Institute. This is my weekly opportunity to talk to the movers, the shakers, the thought leaders in the retail-owned brand, the private brand industry, and just kind of have a chat about what's going on in their business and the industry as a whole. Today, I'm excited to welcome Don Childs. Don, tell us about yourself.
Hey, Christopher. Great to be here. Enjoy all the time that we get to talk with each other, and this is obviously going to be a blast from my end. So a little bit about me. I am executive creative director at Sterling Brands, and I'm based here in Cincinnati, and I'll tell you a little bit more about Sterling in a second. But a little bit about me. I have a family of four, and been married to Michelle since a long time ago. We met in high school and started dating just a little bit of time. Right. Two kids. My oldest is a pilot in the Air Force and lives in Alaska. And my youngest is in a master's program studying biology, hoping to work on her PhD. And my son got into flying because I have my pilot's license, and his first flight was when he was 5 years old, and I'd fly him around in my little Cessna. I haven't flown in years, but it's a wonderful thing to have in common, and it's just great when he calls with stories about flying and whatever he's doing. And my wife was a science teacher, and so my daughter got the science bit of it. So they're great kids, and also have a dog, Ike, who's a 85-pound Shepherd Husky mix and a tremendous handful. It's like having a toddler that moves faster than you can and can knock you over when it gets the zoomies. So he's a bit of a handful. Career-wise, I started out in Chicago, graduated from the University of Illinois in Champaign with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Design, and started working there in Chicago for small design agencies, little boutiques. And, like any kid at that time, I got out of school and I thought I was going to design posters and albums and like cool stuff like that. And sure. I kind of accidentally got into branding, and I worked for a small design agency working with Quaker. And one of the first things I worked on right out of school was the rebrand of Gatorade. And I loved it. And the thing that I love about branding, even now, is that, it's the touchstone to popular culture. After being in Chicago, I came to Cincinnati in my late 30s as head of creative for a large package design firm that had
offices. You can drop names. Was this Laga or no?
Laga, yeah, Lips and
right. So right. For those like agency nerds, it's Lips and Allport Glass, right?
Right.
Which was one of those kind of Mad Men level, old school, iconic agencies, right?
Yeah, it really was, and I've been VP creative at Laga, then the combined entity when we were merged with DeGripko Bay. And through other mergers, acquisitions, we became part of SGK. We became, that combined entity was Brand Image. Also worked with 7-Eleven. 2017, we were the 7-Eleven Agency of the Year, which was fantastic. So when I was at Brand Image, we created 7-Eleven's first real legitimate private brand program. And much of that is still in place now. Won a number of awards for that work, some from Vertex,
which that's right,
was great. So that's work I'm very proud of also. So taking 7-Eleven from a quote unquote private label program where it was stick a 7-Eleven logo on things, or maybe 7 Select, to a real brand was just a blast, because we were not just designing packaging, we were helping them with portfolio architecture and brand architecture. And it was not kind of the classic good, better, best 3-tier. There was a level of sophistication that was really based on understanding the market and the consumer and the need, and marrying that up with their innovation pipeline. And so a great private brand is a lot like a great CPG brand, because there's a rigor that goes into it that I think is mandatory for it to be a brand that has staying power.
Tell us about Sterling. And Sterling has I always imagine, if you've ever seen, there's all these posters of rock bands that are somehow related.
Yeah.
Like this bass player played here, and this, there should be one for agencies, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And Sterling has that same kind of history, whether it be Interbrand or Debbie Millman, or there's a lot going on there, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that's one of the reasons that I was excited to come and join Sterling. Sterling has 3 offices. There is San Francisco, New York, where we were founded, and Cincinnati, which is where I'm located. And we have roughly a little under 100 people across those 3 offices. And one of the things that I also love about Sterling, and I've been here almost 3 years now, is there's a lot of agencies that talk about, we're integrated and we collaborate, and we've got a great team in this office and that office and the other, and everybody commingles and works together. And it's always, in my experience, having lived through that on the agency side of the table, a lot of it is kind of baloney.
Yeah, it's a better story than reality, right?
Right. And so when I was talking with Susan, our CEO, and we're talking, and she had this philosophy of One Sterling. I'm like, yeah, okay, great, it sounds great. And the more I talked with her and the people that I know at Sterling, it felt like it was legitimate. And so cut to the punchline, and that is that one of the things I love about it is, on a daily basis, the teams that I'm leading are comprised of people in New York and in Cincinnati and in San Francisco. And we've got a very flat management structure, and we're able to be very fluid in how we put teams together, because we're trying to find the right talent, the right experience to put teams together. And
Which is crazy, because a lot of that comes from merger, right? So Interbrand and Fleet Becker and yeah, right. I mean, which were all good agencies too.
Right. So we are part of Omnicom, and Interbrand was Sterling was previously Interbrand Cincinnati, and through a restructure, Omnicom made a decision, and I think the right one, to develop the brand consulting group and make sure that each of the entities had its specialty. And Sterling is the consumer brand specialist within Omnicom, and I think that has helped us Omnicom focus on the businesses, but also it makes it easier for us to collaborate, because even though we don't have a fully shared P&L across Omnicom, there's definitely interest in making that cross-agency model work. And so it's not uncommon to work for me as someone who has developed for instance, a brand for Mars. And we do a lot of work with Mars Pet. We do work with Mars Food, to work with BBDO and with Barefoot or Ketchum, and to help them understand the brands that we've created. Because one of my personal pet peeves is when a brand consultancy and a client create a brand, regardless of what it is, and then it transitions to an agency that doesn't fully understand the strategy or and it becomes campaign. It's not brand communication, it's campaign communication. So I love that there's streamlined communication, because we are all part of the same group, and Omnicom really wants us to work well together. And so Mars Hormel is another one where we work very closely with the large agencies that we're sisters and brothers of.
So let's talk about private brands today and kind of what's going on. You just finished judging the Vertex Awards. So thank you for being on the jury. Sure. If you're wondering, Don cannot judge his own or his company's own. They actually don't even see them. So they abstain from those. But it gives you a good kind of, there's several hundred you looked at, and you work in the business all the time. So talk to me about what you're seeing out there. What's working, what's not working, what opportunities are there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I took a bit of a break from judging, but I had judged the first 4 or so. And so I've had an opportunity to see many over the years, and looking at the the examples this year, I was struck by the range of quality in the work. And that means that there was some exceptional work that I wish that I was associated with. I looked at it, I'm like, damn, that's smart, and it looks great. And it's eye-catching. It ticked all the boxes. Great communication hierarchy. Even the name was wonderful. And there were other things that looked like they frankly were templated design. And it's like, well, I just don't see in a competitive world where you're going up against big brands that it is going to be all that competitive unless you're just competing on price. So I was struck by how great some of it was and how average some of it was.
And that's not uncommon. It's really not. I mean, it's
absolutely not. But
I think what's interesting about the US is we still have, particularly on the grocery side, we still have such a fragmented grocery market across the entire country that if you and I were to place those retailers on an evolutionary scale, not just of design, but of
100%.
branding,
Yep.
of even in-store experience, of all that,
Right.
that design that you're looking at, the design would almost line up exactly with where they were in their evolution.
Yeah, and I think that's 100% right. Having worked with Lowe's when they were first starting their program and working with 7-Eleven to help them to develop their program, they went from all of them just from basically like a manufacturer's mindset that it's a product in a box, and evolved to have a marketer's mindset where it's about the consumer. And you can, by looking at their brand design or their packaging, you can kind of map them on that continuum of that evolution, where they are in that range. And
well, it's funny when I talk to manufacturers and they're like, well, you talk a lot about design and all that. I'm like, but let's be really clear. The reason you talk about design and you as a manufacturer should know about it is it's a reflection of their strategy and what's important to them.
Right.
And if you don't understand that, you're not going to pitch well.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. That's 100% it. And it's actually a lot of fun to, again, I'm going to go back to the Gatorade story. It's a lot of fun to start working with a CPG or a retailer who is in its infancy with private brand, and help them understand what private brands can be. Because it's not just package design, it's not just logos, and it's not just delicious looking food on a package. You're trying to build something that's sustainable, because if you look at 7-Eleven or Kroger, these are honest to God legitimate brands that are foundational to their business. How many billion is Simple Truth now?
I think it's 4+.
4+ billion, right?
It's the largest natural and organic brand by leaps and bounds. Like Annie's is this big.
Yeah,
Simple
and
Truth is this big.
you didn't even mention owned brand or private brand, or retailer brand. It's like, it is a brand. And I'm working with I'm working with a client right now, and we're doing a competitive audit. And you tick off and it's a brand that's been around for quite a while, and we're doing a renovation and a relaunch of this brand. So you tick off all of the competitors that they list, and it's kind of the classics, but at the top of the list is private brand. And that's because private brand is much more sophisticated than it originally was, obviously, but they think about themselves as brands. And there's the rigor that goes into the branding and the business strategy and the portfolio management that competes with the CPGs. And I'm a big fan of Simple Truth. It's one of my favorite natural.
Well, you live in Cincinnati, so
I live in Cincinnati. Yeah, perhaps. But I'm trying to be objective. But the product is really good, and it's not just about the product. It's across that whole store. When I see that green dot, and it's Simple Truth, there's Simple Truth Organic. You know what? It's a trust mark. And if I see it, I know that whatever's in that package is good. And that's because they've been very disciplined about how they treat that. And they've treated it like a brand. It's not just stuff in a pack.
Absolutely. Well, so let's talk a little bit about the future. I always like to kind of pull the crystal ball out. Obviously, there's no right or wrong answer, but
Sure.
5 years from now, 10 years from now, what are the big steps? What could private brand be doing? What should they be doing?
So I think one of the and I've been on both sides, the CPG and the retail side, always on the agency end of it. So I've been able to observe as I think pretty objective. One of the things that retailers have the opportunity to do is to innovate. And I don't mean innovate with a small I. I mean innovate with a big I, like truly innovate. Having worked with so many CPGs who want to innovate and have big teams that are dedicated to innovation, when it comes time to connect innovation to brand, they sometimes stumble because their equity can become an anchor around their neck, where they're afraid to do certain things because, oh boy, are we gonna ruin the brand? And I'm thinking, well, your brand is in decline. The reason you're working with us is because it's not going great, right? But retailers, and if you know anything about innovation mindset and agile methodology and lean, test and learn. Retailers are in a unique position because they own the market, their own marketplace, and the ones that have been really successful with innovation are the ones that are willing to put things in market, let it fail, and then yank it. And CPGs will never do it. They talk about doing it. Let's put it in market.
Well, it's because they have 20 SKUs, not 10,000.
Right. Yeah. Right. 100%. Yes.
You have 20 SKUs, pulling one's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And so retailers have the opportunity to think more broadly about what innovation means. And it's not just, another flavor to whatever, a coffee. It's inventing categories, and it's changing the experience in store. And it's taking advantage of all the things that a retailer, by its very nature and its makeup, is well suited for, that is really challenging for big companies that they're next to on shelf. And I've worked with awesome companies, and I love all my clients, and I think all of them to a person would admit this. It's just it's difficult for large companies to innovate. Like the management consultancy I worked for, the whole division I was in was only about developing startups within big companies because they don't know how to do it themselves.
They can't get out of their own way. And unfortunately, large retailers can be that way as well.
Right. So I think, just simply put, I think it's innovation. And I think it's thinking bigger about innovation, and that all of you are running a test market. And if big companies, big CPGs had what you had and could put things in market and see if there was any potential in it. And again, you're going like, let's get it like 70-80% right, and then learn, and then fix it, and then, come back in.
And I laugh because 70, so let's go, and you're a sports guy. What do you need? What batting average do you need to get in the Hall of Fame?
300.
300, which is what percent? 30, right?
Right.
30.
Yeah. Right.
That means you missed.
Yeah, I know.
7 times out of 10.
Right.
If you did that at a retailer, you would get fired.
It's true. Yeah.
So they've got to build a culture that says, let's test and learn, and let's reward you for the test and learn.
Yes.
Right. So, maybe that's not what it started as, but go look at all those guys that worked on the Amazon Fire Phone. They're all still there, and they're all running Alexa, and they're doing a bunch of cool stuff because they learned.
Right.
That was the biggest product failure they ever did by billions.
Right. Yeah. And the time that I had worked with 7-Eleven, they were really good about that. They're like,
Mhm.
hey, what if we tried this? And we'd do strategy for it. We'd see where it fit in their portfolio. We'd develop a design for it. They'd get it in market. Sometimes it didn't work. It's like, oh man, let's use that shelf space for something else. It's like, great. And
Yeah.
so the prototyping in the real world is something that I think retailers have an opportunity to do simply because they're retailers. So there's that part of it. The other is, and you and I both were working in 2008 during
Mhm.
I'll call it the last recession.
Yeah. And I was in home improvement. That was a bad place to be, man.
Yeah.
Great
So
retailer, bad place to be in that recession.
yeah, well, and I was working with both CPGs and retailers at the time,
Mhm.
and I think people who are listening and watching this uh, that were around then also remember, like, that was the Rubicon for private brands,
Yeah.
because the big CPGs uh, stopped investing. It's like they retrenched, they got very conservative, and consumers who were looking to save money were looking for alternatives, and um, retailers said, hey, here's our opportunity, let's up our game, let's bring better products,
Mhm.
let's start thinking about us in terms, like, we're brands, we're not just the low price alternative at shelf. And so when the the big brands that had equity, they let it kind of dissipate and
Yep.
disappear, while the retailers like invested and built and grew. And that was really the watershed for private label. And I think there's the possibility that we're coming up on another one. And
Oh,
consumer,
I think there's a probability. I mean, it's
yeah,
the great thing about 2008, which most consumers and even agencies don't see, is that at that time, just about every agency also built an entire quality, or every retailer built quality programs behind the scenes that
mm,
didn't exist.
mm,
So they were going in and testing and touching and tasting everything, making sure the building blocks were all correct. So now, 12 years, 20 years later, all of a sudden we've got quality, we've got better branding, and the economy is, in the crapper again. So
yeah, yeah. And back then, the big retailer I was working with was Albertson, Super Value,
yeah,
Albertsons, in Boise, and it was so much fun to work with them back then, because, like you said, they were investing in product development. They built their own
yeah.
product teams, and it was in-house. And um, when they did cuttings, it had to, when they say national brand equivalent or better, like, I was in those cuttings, and it was at least
Well, and
as good
that
as.
was who was running then? Joe Ennon was running it then. Is that who
Yeah,
it was?
yeah, I think so.
Joe Ennon has my favorite quote. I think he's selling juice now, but I think he's has my favorite quote from a conference about private brand. He looked at the crowd of a couple hundred people and he goes, "Nobody goes to work to come in second place."
Right. Yeah, yeah. So, I think that's on the horizon, and I think that's not 5 years away. I think that's a near term horizon,
Mm,
and the retailers that um, play it right are really, really well positioned. And I'll tell you that there's a number of the big CPGs that I work with that learned from 2008, and they're not behaving the way they did.
yeah.
They are investing. They're saying, now we have to make sure that we don't let up, take our foot off the gas. So I think that there's a lot of companies that learned from what happened then. And I think that there's also companies that just will not have learned. Yeah. And I think that there's an opportunity for retailers, because of who they are and what they do and how they are uniquely structured and how they can get to market, um, to uh, make another step change. So, it's an exciting time to be
Yeah.
in this business.
Well, so to give a little plug, so we'll actually be doing a virtual innovation summit April
Mm,
19th. 2 hours. It's absolutely free. Go to the website, sign up. We've got in the field right now a questionnaire that is talking to retailers, manufacturers, agencies about innovation in private brand, where it is, where should it be, the whole 9 yards. So we'll be presenting those results, as well as having 3 or 4 retailers on the screen talking to us. So that'll be exciting. So please sign up and join us there. Innovation is definitely the key. So let's close it up then. So 5 questions.
Okay.
Question number 1, what's your favorite word?
Resilience.
Why resilience?
It's there. It could have been a lot of words. I also love the word juxtaposed just because I like the word. But resilience, I've been at this a long time, and you've been at it a long time, and I still am excited to get up in the morning and come and do what I do. And we've all had our shares of ups and downs and baseball bats to the face, in our careers, but being able to kind of put failures behind you and make that part of your past, and you learn from it and move forward, is necessary. But it's also fun. It's fun to focus on the future, and to have a mindset where you're able to not just survive, but learn and grow from life experiences, I think is absolutely critical. So I'd like to think that I'm resilient, and that I've become a better person and a better creative director because of it.
So this is the fun one to ask creative directors, because it's not always the obvious answer. Are you more artistic or more mathematic?
So I'm more artistic, but if the question were phrased differently, like, are you more artistic or rational, or more emotional or rational? Left brain, right. If it's math, forget it. That's not never my thing. But one of the things that I love about, and this topic's, has come up a bunch of times as we've chatted. I love the thinking that goes into the problem solving of design. And great design is applied creativity that is intended to solve a problem. And you've got to be a thinker, and you got to be curious, and you got to want to understand. And so that's why I think you got to have the left brain. So
it's a design business, not fine art. So.
That's right. And it's like, we're not commercial artists, and we're not advertising art directors either. Designers, I think, are just wired differently. And so if it's artistic rational, I think I live somewhere in the middle, and depending on what I need to do, I kind of flex back and forth, but
gotcha. Not math. I'm with you too. My teenager's high school math is well past me. So, number 3, if you could share a meal with anyone, past or present, living or dead, who would it be and why?
So this is a question that I've actually, it's one of those classic questions, and I've thought about it a lot over the years. So my father, who I was very close with, passed in 1998, and I would love to sit down and have dinner with my dad and share stories, and just talk about everything that I've done in my personal life, and the fun stuff I've done, the challenges I've had, my family, my professional life. He was a great guy, and he was, at the end of his career, was general manager for Westinghouse in Australia and Asia. So he had I think when I was early in my career, I didn't have the opportunity to talk at kind of a peer level about business with my dad, because I was in my 20s, right? And he was retired.
You didn't even know the questions to ask.
Yeah, 100%. And now it's like, oh man, the stuff that he went through and the stuff he knows, and just to sit down kind of at almost like a peer level and talk about family and our careers and stuff. I think would be a lot of fun. Plus, he liked to drink bourbon, and so do I. So
I'm with you there, man. I'm with you there. We'll get you a bourbon in Charlotte when you're down for the conference.
that sounds good.
Uh, question number 4. What profession other than your own would you have liked to have attempted?
I mentioned, and I can answer this one quickly too. I mentioned before that I have my pilot's license and that I haven't flown for a bunch of years. I'd be a bush pilot. I would love to live in Alaska or in the Northwest and just have a single engine plane and take supplies or just help people in the middle of nowhere. Just that idea of self-reliance and independence and flying around in some of the most beautiful places in the world. I think it would just be so much fun. Plus, my son now, who lives in Alaska, got his private pilot's license, which is weird. He's a pilot in the Air Force. He flies fighters, but he doesn't have a pilot's license. And so they actually have to go get a pilot's license from the FAA. So he did that because he wants to be
He'll have plenty of hours. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So he wants to do kind of the same thing. And so the two of us have kind of like played with the notion of buying a plane together after he's out of the Air Force and setting up shop as bush pilots, which is a fantasy, but I think it would be just,
most people don't know. I actually have a twin brother. He's fraternal, doesn't look anything like me, but he is an airplane guy.
Yeah.
He started sweeping floors in the local airport to get flight hours when he was 14 years old.
Awesome.
And now we're 54. He is a fully licensed pilot. He's an A&P mechanic. He runs a FOB for, is that right?
Awesome.
FBO for the military upfit of King Airs.
Ooh, wow.
And as a side deal, he does wood, dope, and fabric, which for those people who don't know what that is, old planes had cloth and glue and wood, basically holding them together. Restorations of planes for people.
Oh man!
So he owns a Stearman biplane.
Oh, beautiful! As
well as a 1946 Taylor Craft military trainer.
Fantastic.
So it's a tail dragger that looks like a Cessna, but they could teach the great grandson or father of your kid to fly a long time ago.
That's awesome. Yeah, I actually got my tail wheel endorsement, which is like I was flying in a 1946 Aranca Champ that was,
very similar,
canvas and plywood and metal tubing, and you look down and you can see between the gaps in the floor the ground rushing by.
Yeah, and so that's what he does as his side project, is restore wood, dope, and fabric old planes.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah.
I know just enough about planes to get me in trouble. He would tell me I know nothing. But so last question. So if you could speak to yourself when you began your career, what advice would you give yourself?
I think I've been pretty fortunate with this, but I would make sure that I understood how really, really important this is. Always work with people who are better than you. Hire people that are better than you. Go work at places where you think you might be in over your head. And I did that when I came to Laga. I was like, shoot, I don't know if I can do this. And I still have great relationships with all those people many years later. And they're some of the best at what they do that I've ever worked with. And I only know what I know because I always said yes to opportunities, and I worked with people that I could learn from. And I'm curious. I want to always be growing. And I think you need to surround yourself with people who might intimidate you a little bit and are a little, you can admit that they're better than you because you rise up to their level. So that's the advice that I would give myself if I were
honestly, when I was at Lowe's and had a good agency budget, that was the number one thing I wanted to do, is hire people better than me. Yeah, because I designed for the first 15 years of my career. I was an okay designer. I wasn't a great designer. I started working with great designers and went, wow.
Yeah.
And figured out I wanted to be in strategy and all these other things. And it wasn't, and I still use those tools because they never go away. But then you start working with Laga and Interbrand and all these agencies, and you're like, wow, this is really fun to have a lot of smart people, that can push you and make you uncomfortable, and
Yeah.
you learn something from everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Christopher, I love strategy and I love creative strategy. And one of my happiest days here at Sterling was early on. And I tend to be pretty hands-on with some of that stuff, because I'm pretty particular about strategy for creative. I started working with one of our strategists in New York, and she was so great that I could be totally hands off. Like, I was happy to see what she was going to bring to the next meeting. And it's like, man, it's one of the things that keeps you young, and it just I love working with people that I'm impressed by and excited by. So
Well, I mean, I'll tell you,
same
I'll
page.
never forget, every agency wants a creative brief, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, 90% of the time, creative briefs are a waste of time and they don't do a damn thing with them and they're poorly written. However, when you get that agency who really takes the time to put in the work and you get the creative brief right, and then they deliver creative and they connect the dots.
Yep.
And say, this is what we agreed on and said, this is how it delivers on that.
Yep.
And then they push it past the dots and go, but have you thought about it this way?
100%.
And it's
right.
like magic, like angels are singing, right?
Yeah. And brand design, when it's done the right way, is that bridge between brand strategy and your consumer. Because a brand strategy is academic, and you might have the most beautiful brand strategy on paper, but if you can't bring it to life in a way that's meaningful to your audience, doesn't matter what your strategy is. And so it's connecting the dots, it's building the bridge, it's making the academic real. So it's one of the things that I really love about what we do.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. So this is my show, so I get to plug a couple of things at the end here. As I mentioned, we've got the Virtual Innovation Summit coming up April 19th. Tickets are completely free. It's 2 hours. It'll be fast and exciting. So go register on the site for that. March 23rd, we'll be in Fort Lauderdale, Florida at the Funky Buddha Brewery doing a meetup. So if you're in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, that's also completely free. Come network, talk to a bunch of people. I'd love to buy you a drink and meet you. May 16th through the 18th, we'll be again in Charlotte, North Carolina at our marquee event, the Velocity Conference and Expo. Sterling is graciously a sponsor, and Don will be on stage there as well. And then right after that, I hop on a plane and go to Amsterdam, and we'll present the Vertex Awards to the other half of the world in Amsterdam the Monday night after. So on May 22nd. So Vertex Awards in Charlotte, then Vertex Awards in Amsterdam. Come visit us and we'll show you some great design. So thank you very much, Don.
Yeah, you are welcome. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.